for a researcher, there's nothing better than seeing people run with your ideas and try to make change with it.
Greetings from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Kia ora and tēnā koutou to you all. I'm also at the moment the National President of the Tertiary Education Union in New Zealand, as well as having an academic role. So I'm talking about something which I've been part of over the last decade or so. So this is the start of capturing this process we've been going through, so it's kind of pretty fledgling at the moment. It's a story of union renewal driven by a social justice imperative rather than one which is more common, which is often in union decline. We took on board as a union that in New Zealand we're in a fairly particular situation because of the Treaty of Waitangi, which you may or may not know about, but I'll get back to that. But just literally overnight, on the 14th of October last year, a significant date for you here also in Australia, but in New Zealand we had a national election, a general election, and we took a great leap backwards. We now have the most right-wing government, coalition government, we have had since before I was born, I think.
Since Labour was in government.
It's even worse than the 1990s. They've already come out quite clearly and said we don't talk with unions. So our environment has changed considerably. Workers' rights and union rights are again under attack in a major way. We were listed on the 100-day plan to destroy some of our institutions. So it's a different kind of environment than we were in when we first started looking at trying to transform our union. But in one way, it's made it even more important what we did. So unions always have to be relevant, and I think that's something which many unions struggle with today, and it was something which, while we weren't in a very bad place, we realised that we could become more relevant. We often just have a class focus when we talk about the labour struggle, and it's much, much more than that. Unions tend to be patriarchal, misogynist, and class-based, and it's time that changed. So I'm with the Tertiary Education Union, Te Hautu Taharangi, and we started about 10 years ago getting in some experts to do an audit of what our relationship looked like under the treaty. So the treaty, we're not a signatory to the treaty because that's between the Crown and iwi, but we feel that we have a moral obligation, as all unions should, to preserve, enhance and build that relationship between both Māori and non-Māori. So we were driven to that, and we have been working on it in a very particular way, slowly over time, because you can't bring about change quickly. You want to bring on board the grassroots. It's their union. They have to want to see this happening. And I think we did quite a good job. We already had a very active Māori membership. We had Māori representation on all committees. So that wasn't something that, wasn't there. But we wanted to actually acknowledge more fully that relationship. So we've been changing things, like we have karakia at the beginning of meetings. That's prayers or blessings. They're not religious, they're about making people mindful of the purpose of coming together. It's a really nice way to get people to focus on the task and to bring a purpose, a common purpose, an acknowledgement that you're in a space to do mahi or work. And so those things got pretty well accepted across the board. Even some of our more sort of strange white folk even managed to butcher the language and have a go. But one of the things that has happened is that we've seen a much wider use of te reo within our union. It's becoming normalised, it's becoming just part of how we do business. To bring this change about, we had to get on board everybody. We had to, the last point on the list of what we had to do, according to the audit, was actually have a new constitution. So we started from scratch and rewrote it, and it was also driven by some legal changes to the Act as well that required us to do that. So we had an opportunity to rewrite the rules, which if you've ever done that, it's a bitch of a job, but for sure. And everything had to be done. It's going to be translated into te reo as well. We're still working on that. But what we did was we went out and had literally hundreds of meetings, be either online or in person, with branches, with committees, with individuals, just some drop-ins, with all the networks and representative structures we already had, to talk through the changes that we were proposing, so that they understood, so that when it came to our conference in May last year, that they wouldn't rock up and go, what's this bit of paper? We don't know what you're talking about. So it was incredibly labour intensive, and we just had to do that. We had to sit and talk with people who didn't even know anything and ask the dumbest questions possible and get them to understand, but also to get feedback on things, did it work for them or not. So it was quite a process. And it was actually quite scary, some of the people's resistance out of just plain overt racist ignorance was quite scary. But they were a challenge, and you step up to these challenges and have interesting conversations. We had resistance from both Māori and non-Māori. I remember one guy stood up at a conference and said he didn't want this co-governed union. He wanted all the white people in the room to just bugger off and leave New Zealand. It was the most impassioned speech I think I've heard. People were in tears. He was amazing. He was absolutely amazing. And then he came back around and explained that actually, you know, he's got as much European heritage as he probably does Māori. So he walks that line. And what we had to do was actually acknowledge we're trying to bring together something new, bring people together with a common purpose. And so it was a fantastic experience, I must say. We did see this overt racism, which I found quite interesting, because that was actually fueled in part by what had been happening in general society. You know, COVID came along, everybody who thought mandates and vaccines were bad also think co-governance is bad because we don't want to share power with anybody. And it gave people license to be more vocal about some of the nasty feelings and thoughts that were going around. It was quite horrific. But what we managed to achieve was the thing was passed unanimously at conference. We had people in tears because they couldn't believe we had done something so momentous. It was pretty cool. So we're now the first co-governed union in New Zealand, which means our top decision-making body is 50-50, sitting at the table, Māori and non-Māori. As of the 1st of February, which is soon, I won't just be the national president, I'll be one of 2 co-presidents, which will be interesting. We have co-vice presidents. We'll have new standing orders, which don't say you've got 3 minutes to speak and then you shut up, and if you want to foreshadow an amendment to the motion, Mr. Chair, in actual fact,
Time's up, Julie.
we'll be using a much more consensus-based approach. So some of the things that will be changing, hopefully for better for everybody. We had an immediate increase in our Māori membership because suddenly they saw relevance in the union. But we still have a long way to go, but we're really confident that we have got the bones in place. And in the context of a government at the moment who is against power sharing, against Māori in society, it's even more important to have a model which says to them. So, thank you.
Thanks.